Welcome. Thanks for watching this recording. The idea of this video is to give you guys something to use to study to help you prepare for instrument checks. We're not going to simulate today an actual instrument check as, say, stage 2 or the EOC. Instead, what we're going to do is simulate that Tyler Bell is going to be a check instructor, and he's checking me for my instrument knowledge, and he will cover a lot of the material that could be on any of those checks. This is not meant to be necessarily like a gouge of what exactly will be on your stage check, but a lot of the material Tyler is going to test me on will be material that could be on any of these instrument checks, whether it's the commercial IFR strand check, instrument stage 2, instrument EOC. So I think it will be beneficial for you guys to watch this in preparation for those checks. So our check instructor, I'm going to be the student. Hopefully I pass this check. And we're going to jump right in. Now, we've already began the beginning part of the check, so I'll let Tyler kind of take over from there.
Great. So we'll make sure we have an emergency worksheet done, which looked great. 100%. Nice job, Scott. Also, a safety and ops quiz. We'll make sure we go through that. And that also looked fantastic. Also, I've already checked Scott's certificates and documents. So his medical, pilot certificate, even though it's just the ground, he made sure to come prepared with those things. Okay. In addition to those, we've got some paperwork and documents as well as handbooks that we need to come prepared with. Do you want to show us what you brought?
Sure. I did bring a paper flight plan. For those of you with iPads, these are the way we used to do this. But yeah, an iPad flight plan would work as well, but I'm not technologically advanced. I do have my FAR aim ready to go there. And I've got my terps, I've got my AFD, or what you guys like to call my iPad right there, 4 flights ready to go. And then I do have my safety and ops manual right there, as well as my PIM, and just in case, I even have my E6B, as well as we'll be using resources on the computer as well to look at charts and weather and that kind of stuff.
Great. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and jump into the check.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got our flight plan here from Salt Lake City to Afton, Wyoming. How would you plan on filing this flight plan prior to departure?
So there's a various amount of ways I could file. I think the way I'd prefer to do is just call it in. But 1-800-WXBrief.com, that would work. Or if I had a 4-flight subscription, I could put it in through 4Flight and file it that way.
Fantastic. And is there a time frame that we should be trying to file that flight plan prior to departure, or could I just do it right before I take off?
So they ask that you file at least 30 minutes in advance before departure.
Sweet. Okay. All right. Can you walk me through the PAVE checklist? And then once you've told me what each of the letters mean in the PAVE checklist, start taking me through the individual elements of those letters to make sure that we are prepared for this flight.
Okay. First P is for pilot. I want to make sure that the pilot is that's involved in the safe checklist, and am I familiar with the area and the procedures? Am I proficient? That kind of stuff. Aircraft. Yeah. Am I G1000, or am I an Archer that has no GPS in it? And that kind of stuff with the aircraft. And then the V, that stands for environment. Looking at weather, you can also look at like airport environment and that kind of stuff, as well as the E for external pressures. That's the one that's going to kill you. That's the get there-itis. Why am I choosing to do this in the first place? What is pushing me to take on additional risk that I shouldn't be taking on?
Perfect. All right, let's start with the P up there on the board.
Okay.
Tell me what we need in order for you to act as PIC on an instrument flight plan.
Okay, in order for me to act as PIC on an instrument flight plan, obviously I need to have my pilot certificate with an instrument rating, and I also need to meet the recent flight experience requirements from 6156, meaning that I've done within the previous 6 calendar months. And I don't count this month, so I can count back 6 months before this month. Make sure that I've done 6 approaches, holding, intercepting, and tracking nav aids.
Perfect. All right, let's do a little scenario with the currency. So let's say that you did 3 approaches in January.
Let's write my
Yeah.
months down. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. Okay.
Sweet. All right. So let's say we did 3 in January, and then we did 3 more in May, as well as our holding and tracking.
Okay. Was I current back here in January?
Let's say that you're currently.
What month is it now? We're in.
Let's say we're in June right now.
Okay, we're gonna pretend it's June.
Are
Okay.
we current?
As long as I was current and I hadn't been not current for 6 months before I started doing this stuff, if I did these 3 approaches and they included holding, intercepting, tracking, then yes, I am currently. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 previous months. I've done 6 approaches and holding, intercepting, tracking.
Cool. All right. So when will our currency end?
Okay. Well, looking at that, once I lose these 3, then I'm in trouble. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if that one's number 6. So yeah, it looks like in the end of July. So in July I'd be current because in the previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I've still done 6 approaches. But once I get to August and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that drops off. I've only done 3. I need to do 3 more to get current.
All right. So let's say the approaches were done on January 20th. Does that mean they expire?
Yeah, the end of the calendar month. So the end of the month.
Cool. All right. Now, how much time do we have? So let's say that July rolls around. How much time do we have left to do 6 more approaches, holding and tracking?
Okay, so so July and I lose my experience. I could go not current for 6 months, and during that 6 months, I just got to go do the approaches. Take a safety pilot up, go hop in the ATD, go get those done. But if it goes 6 months that I haven't been current, the only way I can regain currency is through an instrument proficiency check.
Sweet. And who can do an instrument proficiency check for you?
Really, any instructor that is qualified to teach instruments, so CFIIs. But also, if I wanted to go with a DPE, I could go with a DPE as well.
Sweet. And now let's say you're still in your 6-month grace period, and you decide that the simulator is going to be a cheaper option for you. Are there any requirements to change, or is it the same as if you were to do it in the plane?
Oh, I love this regulation. Now, it has changed. So, yeah, as long as I do 6 approaches, it could be done in any combination of the airplane. It could be done in an FTD. It could be done in an ATD. All of them in an ATD. As long as I've done those things within the 6 calendar months and logged it, then I'm good.
Sweet. And how do we log those approaches in order for that to count towards our currency in our log book?
Well, we have to follow the Reagan 6151, but I've got to log the type of approach and the place the approach took place. And if I'm using a safety pilot, I have to log the name of the safety pilot in my logbook as well.
Good. Does that have to be a signature?
Not for safety pilot, but if I'm logging it from an instructor being the safety pilot giving me instruction, he's got to sign for the instruction.
Sweet. Cool. All right. And then what documents do you need to come prepared with?
We'll keep this over here. For my personal documents?
To
take the IFR flight? Okay. So I would need government issue photo ID. I think this works for Salt Lake. Doesn't work on my check right now. I'm going to take my pilot certificate with me, and then you can see hiding in there also is my medical certificate.
Very nice. All right. Moving on to the A in PAVE for aircraft. Let's talk a little bit about airworthiness. So when you're determining whether or not the airplane is airworthy for you to take on a flight, what are you looking for?
Okay, determine if an airplane is airworthy for an IFR flight specifically. Let's start with inspections required. I'm going to actually switch markers here. Hopefully this marker works good. So for the inspections required, I'm going to use the fun AV8A acronym. So I want to make sure that any ADs that are required, those have been complied with and have been signed up in the logbook. VOR check. This is an operational check, not so much maintenance, but I want to make sure the VOR has been checked within the last 30 days. We got inspection here. Now I'm going to be taking a Cessna Skyhawk for my instrument flight. So the inspections required, we do the progressive. Our progressive has several operations, 4 of which you have to do every 50 hours, and I got to make sure I complete the full progressive within 12 calendar months. Or if I'm not progressive, then that would just be simply the 100-hour inspection. I want to make sure an annual has been completed, but again, since we're on progressive, we don't do the 100-hour and annual, we just follow the progressive, but it does need to be completed every 12 calendar months. Make sure the transponder's been inspected. Got to have that inspected if I'm going to use it. The ELT, the transponder, that's every 24 calendar months. The ELT needs to be inspected every 12 calendar months. And then the altimeter static system, that does need to be checked every 24 calendar months. And this one is required for IFR flight.
Very nice.
Okay. Continuing on your question, you're asking me airworthy for the airplane, right?
Yes.
I guess I need to make sure it was an IFR capable aircraft. So if I go in the POH, into the limitation section, and it does say that it is approved for IFR day and night. So it is an IFR approved aircraft. And I would need to make sure that the appropriate documents are on board. Appropriate documents being the AERO acronym. Make sure it's got an airworthiness certificate displayed for passengers and people boarding. Our airworthiness certificate happens to be pilot side, just down on the left in that little pocket. With the airworthiness certificate, the registration, that needs to be on board as well. Registration doesn't need to be displayed though, so make sure that airworthiness certificate's in front. Operating handbook, that's in the back seat, and inside the operating handbook, we have the weight and balance equipment list and the weight and balance data inside there. Would you like me to go over equipment that needs to be operational for airworthy for IFR?
Yeah, and if you want, you can just do what's required for IFR, unless you want to go through all of them.
Okay, well, we know that I need to still have a tomato flames. Anything required for VFR, it's going to be required for IFR. If it's a day flight, I don't need the VFR night stuff, but if it's a night flight, I would need the VFR night flight as well. So, and then we'll go into grab card. Let's use the black marker. Grab card is the acronym that I like to use. Okay, we got a generator alternator. We got that. We got radios. This includes two-way radio and appropriate navigation equipment. So that way I can actually navigate IFR. We need altimeter. This would be a sensitive altimeter, meaning it's got a one of the hands will actually show hundreds of feet. I can't just have it showing thousands of feet. That would be really hard to level off an MDA. We got to have the ball or the inclinometer. We got to have a clock that you can read seconds. You got to have an attitude indicator. We got to have rate of turn, and we have to have a directional gyro for IFR flight.
Good. And then going back to the equipment, let's talk about the VOR inspection.
Okay.
What are some different ways that we can accomplish that, and who's allowed to do that?
Okay, for a VOR inspection, really any pilot can do it and sign off saying that the VOR inspection's been done. I could open up the chart supplement here and go into the VOR checks and see like what type of published checkpoints that there are. And if you've got a for flight, it's awesome. Go to the table of contents and you can actually, they're all hot linked. You can just click right on it and it'll take you to it. But honestly, I've got 2 VORs. I don't need to worry about what's in the book because I can just pull up a VOR on receiver 1, pull up the same VOR on receiver 2 and see if they agree with each other. I'm kind of checking VOR receiver 1 versus receiver number 2. And Salt Lake also is convenient that we do have a VOT signal that Salt Lake puts out, so I can test it on that as well.
Cool. How would we do the VOT check?
So the VOT works by pumping out the 360-degree radial in every direction. So no matter where you are, you're going to receive the 360 radial from that station. And so basically, you just either tune in 360, and that should give you a from flag, or you could put 180, and you should get a to flag. You need to be within 4 degrees on that check.
Sweet. Now, when we're going through our required equipment here, you mentioned that we're going to need some nav equipment, in order to know where we're going. So GPS is going to be a pretty common nav source that we're using. How do we know that the GPS on board our aircraft is IFR certified?
Well, there's several ways. Probably in the Cessna, it's a little trickier because it's actually published, or not published, but the airplane was certified as that equipment part of it. So the fact that it's approved for IFR day and night, and that was the equipment that it was approved with, shows that I can use that GPS for IFR. But I would want to read in the operating limitations, go and look at what the GPS and G1000 limitations would be, which they don't say anything against using it for IFR stuff. But I could check like the G1000 limitations in here. Yeah, I can shoot approaches. I can do that. If I was in the Archer, I'd just go into the supplement section of the POH and look at the supplement of that added optional GPS and see what that GPS was actually approved for, whether you can use it for approaches or just en route or only VFR.
Great. And if I took my cell phone with me, why am I not allowed to use that as a GPS?
So any GPS you use under IFR, and it really spells it out quite nicely in the AIM in chapter 1. Let's go ahead and turn to that list so that way I don't just start making up too much stuff. But if I go to chapter 1 and 1-1-17, and you can see I actually got a lot of this highlighted here, where we've got general requirements. So one, it needs to be TSO certified. That means it's certified to be an IFR GPS. It also, if you do not have WASPs, you have to have alternate means of navigation installed in the aircraft. And actually for the Skyhawk, that's one of the limitations, even though we do have WASPs in some of them, it says you have to have your VORs operational. It's got to have RAIN capabilities, and you've got to have procedures established for what you would do if you had lost RAIN. And it needs to be permanently installed in the aircraft. So it's not just like a handheld thing, but it actually needs to be like installed by a mechanic into the aircraft. Yeah.
All right, kind of moving on to environmental on the page checklist there. Let's talk about some pre-flight action required when we're getting ready for this flight.
Okay. So are you leading at the 91103 regulation?
Yep.
Okay. So 91103, there's a lot of acronyms that you could use. I'm going to use FAA Tower. That's the acronym I'm going to use. So I need to know the amount of fuel that's required for this IFR flight. I need to know of alternates available. Where can I divert in case the plan can't be made? I also need to know ATC delays. So any known ATC delays. Takeoff and landing distances. And then you got to know the weather, and you need to know runway lengths at the airports of intended use as well.
Right. What is the difference between the alternate requirement for 91103 and the IFR requirement to have a file alternate?
Okay, well, this reg says anytime I go IFR, I need to know what alternates are available. I need to know where can I divert. That's not necessarily where I'm filing to divert or meeting the requirement of filing an airport. But when I file IFR, I got to have two things to not have to file a specific airport. I need to have, number one, my destination has to have an instrument approach. And number two, I need to meet the 1-2-3 weather rule, plus or minus an hour. I need 2,000 foot ceilings and 3 census mile visibility or better to not have to file an alternate.
Cool. Let's do a hypothetical scenario and say that the weather minimums were below what you're saying is going to force us to file an alternate. Okay. What airport would you choose and why?
Oh man, that's a great question. So let's go ahead and look over here at my screen, and let's take a look at SkyVector and see what we have available. So here's Afton. This is our destination. So let's go ahead and start with what if we wanted to use Soda Springs. Now, that's probably not a very likely scenario, being that if you can't make it into Afton, you're probably not getting into Soda Springs. But if I wanted to file Soda Springs, there's no instrument approach procedures there. So that means I would need to be able to descend from the MEA down all the way to landing via VFR. So basically, I need clouds basically to be higher than 15,000 feet if I'm going to file Soda Springs. Let's take a look at Bear Lake and see what approaches Bear Lake has. So I'm looking at Bear Lake. They've got 2 RNAV approaches. Now, this is a little bit of a problem because Afton itself has only, if we click on Afton here, oh, am I sharing my screen? I'm not. Shoot. Okay, so let's go back and share the screen.
I was going to say something, but I thought it was just...
No, okay. So here's Soda Springs that we were talking about right here. Notice how it's a Brown Airport, meaning there's no instrument approach procedure. So again, you got to have MEAs or VFR conditions from the MEA all the way down to file out. Coming to Bear Lake, which is just a little south of Afton, Bear Lake has 2 RNAV approaches. And if we take a look at Afton also only has 2 RNAV approaches. So if I was WAS equipped, I could actually file Bear Lake as well. And I also have to double check that those don't have a little happy NA next to them, which that one, see that NA? Nope, can't file based off that approach. So let's try runway 10. And that one has an NA. So really, Bear Lake, you're the same as Soda Springs. If I'm filing you, MEA down. But let's pretend it didn't have the NA. If I was going to file Bear Lake as an alternate, I couldn't do that without WAS, because without WAS, I can use GPS for my destination, which I got to use GPS to fly an approach in there, or my alternate, but not both. In this case, I would be depending on GPS to get for my destination and my alternate, and that wouldn't work. So let's take a look at somewhere like, let's come back towards home. Let's go to Logan, see what Logan would require. So we've got an ILS 17. It is not applicable. So this is getting confusing. Let's take a look at RNAV 17. Hey, look, we can do the RNAV 17. Now we notice here, it does have non-standard alternate minimums. So I would want to look those up and find out what the ceiling would be. If it didn't have that circle in A, this is a non-precision approach. I'd need 800-foot ceilings and 2 statute mount visibility.
Great, cool. All right, now let's let's assume that we've already flown into Afton. We're shooting the approach. We get down to our minimums, and we decide to go missed.
Okay.
And now you decide you need to divert. Are you now allowed to go to Bear Lake?
Absolutely. In the diversion, I can go to Mountain King Ranch if I want to. Doesn't matter where I filed my alternate was. Generally speaking, file your alternate is where you actually would want to go in a diversion. But no, in a diversion, PIC gets to decide where I'm going to go.
Great.
And none of these like GPS and all that. Those are only filing rules.
Good. Okay. All right, let's pull up the approach chart into Afton. And I'm going to use the airport diagram on there to go through some of our other items for the pre-flight action.
Okay.
So looking at that airport view there, what is the runway length at Afton?
Okay, so we've got one runway 3416, and it's 7,025 feet long.
Does Afton have declared runway distances?
They do not, and probably I don't see any displaced thresholds or crossing runways for land and hold short. So nope, it does not. If it did, it'd have a D right here. So
what does declared runway distance mean?
It helps you know how much runway distance you have that's actually available for landing, especially if I had a displaced threshold, versus just how long the runway is. Also in land and hold short operations, then I can have further declared distances on how much distance I have land and hold short of such runways.
Great. What can you tell me about the lighting available for this runway?
There's not much. Looks like I got a PAPI for 16. I got a PAPI for 34. Medium intensity runway lights for 1634 with limitations. So it's probably pilot controlled, I'd imagine. Have to read the AFD to go further than that. And has runway and identifier lights for both runways. As a VFR pilot, I hate these lights because those are those flashing strobes at the beginning of the runway when it's actually a night flight, and they blind you as you're trying to come in on final. White flashing strobes on the end. But I guess if it was instrument, and I'm down to low visibility, I'd probably be happy I had those to identify the runway. But there are no approach lights depicted.
Yep. What are the fuel requirements?
Okay, so let's go back to the video and fuel requirements. So basically, I need to be able to get to my destination and fly for an additional cruise of 45 minutes past my destination.
Sweet. And traffic delays, what is that referring to, and where can we find out about those?
So traffic delays, they're talking about ATC delays. There's a place on the FAA website you can look at delays. Easiest way for me is I just ask the briefer if there's any ATC delays I need to be made aware of.
Sweet. And then the last item for pre-flight action is going to be weather.
Okay.
So if you want to crack open FAA or aviationweather.gov, and we can.
Aviationweather.gov. Okay. We are now at aviationweather.gov.
Cool. So why don't you walk me through a weather briefing to give me a high-level view of what the weather is doing today and whether or not that will result in a go or no-go decision for you.
Okay, let's go ahead and make this screen a little bit bigger. Okay, let's go advisories. This is where I'm going to start. Just look at hazardous weather advisories. Let's look at SIGMETs. Okay, so I'm checking, like, I don't have something like this along my route. Looks like we got a turbulent SIGMET that's over the Sierra Nevadas. And so I'm looking for, with SIGMETs, that's really severe weather. Do you want me to go more in depth on like a convective SIGMET or turbulence or ice, or?
We can kind of come back to some more detailed questions. For now, you can kind of just do what's relevant to the flight.
Perfect. So let's go to air mets. Let's remove the high altitude turbulence because I don't care. We're going to stay low. Let's zoom in. Okay, and you can see we do have a turbulence or a turbulent air met, moderate or greater turbulence through, looks like pretty much almost the whole flight. Looks like we come out of it a little bit there. Mountain obscuration for the majority of the flight, especially once we get north of Salt Lake. And there is an air met out for icing conditions. Yep, and then we can even check, see what that goes on later into the day. Yeah, we've got an IFR air met out further into Wyoming. But looks like really that's not changing much. Okay, so forecast. We can check the convection forecast. Yeah, we're not expecting convective activity. So let's keep going. I can check the icing stuff later. Let's look at the prog chart and get kind of a basic idea of what's going on. So looking at the prog chart, yeah, we got a cold front right there. And we also have a stationary front here. Kind of close together isobars too, so could have a little bit of wind. Not too surprised that there's some turbulence out there. Let's go ahead and, this is valid for noon, so 18 minus 6, noon. And then we go further to 6 p.m. Yeah, look, that looks less than stellar. That cold front doesn't really move much, but it does look like we do have a fair chance of getting snow and mix, which is crazy because I'm looking out the window right now and it is like clear skies. Okay, let's go ahead next with the prog charts. Let's take a look at the low-level surface prog. Again, this is for 6 p.m. Yeah, they're saying marginal conditions, marginal VFR, basically for all of Wyoming, and again that moderate turbulence to be expected. Luckily, it looks like actually once you get north of here, that's more high altitude turbulence. But let's go back and look and see for the noon one. And noon's calling for a little bit of turbulence out there, and still marginal. Wind on what the heck? Well, I guess they're forecasting. Okay. Alrighty. Let's continue with TAFs. I pulled up some TAFs. Let's go ahead and see Salt Lake City. Yeah, look at that. Showers in the vicinity, and this is 23, so that's going to be at 5 p.m. local. 320-12, gusting 20. Showers in the vicinity, scattered at 3, broken at 6. Yeah, here I'm gonna just show real quick out the window just so people can see what I'm talking about. Okay, we'll get the camera back on. Okay, so like, let's see if this will work. There literally is not a cloud in the sky. Yeah, you can't see, it's just all like white, but it's okay. There's some clouds, but it is gorgeous. And they're saying in about 3 hours we're gonna go to broken at 4,000 and showers in the vicinity. Yeah, and it looks like later on even rain. Let's go back to the screen share. Okay, so yeah, and even they're calling light showers of rain, so rain showers, and that's at 7 p.m. So yeah, the weather's supposed to turn pretty quick. Let's look. Afton doesn't have a TAF, so let's check Logan, and then we'll check Jackson and Big Piney. Again, rain showers starting at 5 p.m., but showers in the vicinity before that, broken at 4. So I mean that means we got clouds at 8,000 feet. I'm starting to think I'm not doing this flight, Tyler. 7 p.m. Looks like 4 statute miles, light snow, and overcast at 20. Yeah, that doesn't again. Showers in the vicinity, overcast at 4 before then. Well, let's see what Big Piney is calling for. Big Piney, yeah, scattered at 3-5, broken at 6, but then coming at 21. This is 3 p.m. Showers in the vicinity, broken at 4. So really, we're looking at clouds probably starting at about 8,000 feet. I filed 12, so I'm not feeling great about this. Observations, we can look at METAR, see what's actually occurring. Oh, look at this. Afton is fantastic. 2.5 statute miles, light snow, broken at 2,400, overcast at 2,800, which based off of this is telling me I probably should be filing an alternate, even though I didn't. And that I'm going to call that a no-go decision. Yeah, just so I can show you what we're looking at the window. 10 statute miles clear. That's Ogden. And yeah, it's gorgeous down here. Salt Lake's calling few clouds at 5.5, scattered at 8.5, scattered at 11. Yeah, that's a stretch. Yeah. Okay, so there we go. That's a quick look at the weather. I'm sure there's more you could ask me if you wanted to, but what else can I help you with there?
Yeah, so let's take a quick look at the convective outlook.
Okay.
And I just want you to tell me a little bit about the different colors that we could potentially see on here, specifically to the difference between that darker green and the lighter green.
Okay, so we got light green here and darker green. So if I look at the chart, it says the light green means thunderstorm activity. So this is telling me where basically the ingredients are in place. We got the lifting action, sufficient moisture, and unstable lapse rate where you're going to have convective activity. They're expecting thunderstorms. One thing that's interesting, you'll notice, is we've left the aviation weather. We are now in like just normal weather page. And so this marginal is saying that there is a marginal risk of severe thunderstorms. And I mean, really, for me in a Skyhawk, any thunderstorm is severe. But like, we're talking about like areas where now they're telling the people of Nebraska and South Dakota, like, hey, there's a chance, farmers, you guys on the ground, there's going to be a severe thunderstorm, a marginal chance of that occurring. So I probably am not messing around in that area today, and I would need to be wary of thunderstorms in any of the green areas.
Very nice. Let's go back to aviationweather.gov, and let's go to the prog chart, and we'll do the surface analysis.
Okay, do the surface plot.
Yeah, sorry, surface plot.
Okay.
And looking at the surface plot, we were looking at some of the cold fronts on there. How does a cold front move, and why does it generally tend to bring more convective and severe weather along with it?
Okay, well, so the front's going to move in the direction the arrows point. Cold fronts generally move about twice as fast as a warm front. And the big problem that they do weather-wise is as they come moving in, they take all this warm air that's on the surface here, and as it pushes it out, it's going to push that warm air up. I kind of imagine like a snow plow. So you're going to get a lot of lifting action. You're going to get a lot of convective activity that's possible from that. So if the conditions are right, you can get pretty bad thunderstorms. In fact, usually if there's a squall line, it's often developed along a cold front.
And what can you tell me about the low pressures that we're seeing over Utah?
Well, and there looks like there's not super big lows. I mean, kind of like here's a low, and then it kind of comes back up and then goes back to a low, another high. Generally speaking, low is going to move in a counterclockwise motion around the low, and also you're going to get, generally speaking, more unstable conditions from a low. These ones don't really worry me too much because they're not super big low. Like this low over here, I bet you it's unstable as all get out, and you're going to get stormy conditions coming from that low.
So how are you determining the strength of these low pressures?
Oh, then looking at these isobars. I mean, this low pressure, you got isobar, 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 isobar. I mean, so from here, I mean, there was all those isobars difference in pressure, where, I mean, we kind of top out in high pressure, and 2 isobars later, there's the low, and then we're going kind of back up and then back down. There's not a whole lot of pressure differences, especially in the southwest here. So it's not a significant low, but yeah, it's lower than the surrounding area.
Sweet. And what other things can we infer based upon looking at the isobars? What other information could those communicate to us? Yeah,
you're looking at these isobars here, where you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like really close. I bet you the winds aloft are going to be pretty strong in those areas. Where, you know, if we come back down here to like the Midwest, come to Indiana, it's probably not a whole lot of wind going on. And again, that can change by local and whatever different weather stuff's happening. But often when the isobars are close, the wind is really whipping, and when they're far apart, it's usually calmer.
Great. So based upon what we've looked at with the weather so far, would you consider the atmosphere to be stable or unstable?
So here, oh man, that's a tough question. So really, the ultimate determiner is going to be temperature, and what I'm going to look at if it's stable. Generally speaking, the low pressure is going to bring more unstable. My guess, looking out my window, looking at the stratus clouds that I can see, there's a little bit of puffies out there. I'd say it's questionable. We don't really, this isn't really telling me whether it's, along this cold front, we're probably expecting instability, right? As that cold front moves in. So I'd probably want to go look at the winds and temps. Would you like me to look there? Okay, so let's go winds and temps. Actually, before we do that, let's go back to METARs and see what the temperature at the surface of Salt Lake is. So temperature at the surface of Salt Lake is 12 degrees. And so then if I go to the winds and temp, let's start at 9. So 9 is 0. So we went from 12 degrees to 0 degrees in basically 5,000 feet. And in 5,000 feet, on average, 2 degrees per 1,000 feet, we should have gone from 12 to positive 2. So, but it's still kind of in that neutral area, because once you get past 3 degrees per 1,000 feet, then you're looking that it is unstable. And from going up 5,000 feet from 12, 5 times 3 is 15. -3 would be an unstable temperature from there. Go up to 12,000 feet and drops -7. So another 3,000 feet, and again you drop 7. So I would say it's about neutral stability today.
Great. Earlier you told me you decided that this would be a no-go. I think it was kind of obvious why, but what are some of the major threats facing us on this flight?
Well, my first concern is going to be icing. Looking at those cloud conditions, I'm in an aircraft not certified for icing. So let's go and look at what the clouds will be en route for about the time that we'd be going. Zoom that out a little bit. So let's go with the base. I had flight plan for 12,000 feet. I've got overcast at 5, overcast at 7, overcast at 8, broken at 9. And so it looks like for the most part, I'm going to be in the clouds. There is an air med out for icing. I'm going to be, as we just looked on the winds and temperature aloft, 9,000 feet is going to be freezing. Anything above that at 12, I'm going to be -7. It's definitely an icing threat. That right there is going to stop me from going IFR on this flight. But looking at the precipitation and weather stuff, the fact that it was snowing in Afton kind of was alarming, but you see that they're calling for definitely a chance of snow, and then in some of these areas, snow likely for that. So that's why I'd be making a no-go decision.
Cool. So with regard to icing, what are some different types of ice that we could face?
Okay, ice. So we could get rime ice. That's like your snow cone looking ice, or you can get clear ice, more of like ice cube in the tray type of ice, or you can actually have a mix between the two.
Nice. So what's the difference between rime ice and clear ice, and which one would you say is more dangerous?
Well, rime ice is usually from smaller supercooled liquid droplets, where clear ice usually comes from larger supercooled large droplets. And I'm a little bit more scared of clear ice because it can build fast, and it can also move past protected areas of the airplane if I had ice protection. And it's usually associated with convective activity and really unstable conditions, where the rime is more predominantly found in stratus type clouds. Not that I would take rime ice lightly if rime ice can still build pretty fast and cause major problems, but clear ice tends to build faster and be heavier and can often overwhelm icing protection.
And where would be some of the first places you would see ice start to build on your aircraft?
So smaller protruding surfaces, like if I can see my temperature probe, that'd be good. I like the little step on the Cessna, where you step to go climb on the wing to check the fuel, because that's got those little things that stick up. That should start building ice pretty quick. I imagine my pitot tube would want to start building it pretty fast too.
Do we have to worry about carb ice in this plane?
Negative. We're fuel injected in the Skyhawk, but that, yeah.
And what if we had some impact ice forming on the
air
intake?
They put the air filter just right in front of the airplane, so I assume in icing conditions that would happen pretty quick. The POH does say that it is equipped with an alternate air that is automatic, where if it can't get air from the filter on the outside, it's just going to open up the door and take unfiltered air from inside the cowling and put it into the engine automatically.
Great. Cool. I think that looks good for weather. So assuming that we were going to continue this flight if the weather wasn't so poor, looking at your flight plan, talk to me a little bit about the altitude you chose and power settings and what our climb performance is going to be for today.
Okay, so altitudes, I chose 12,000 feet. Mainly the MEA for most of the route was 10, but to get over towards the approach, they had listed an MEA of like 11.7. So I figured, hey, we'll go up to 12. I don't need oxygen. We'll just plan the climb up to there. But hey, I'll take 10 from ATC. That sounds nice. Up at 12, from the book, I got 2,600 RPM. That gave me a true airspeed of 116 knots and 8.5 gallons per hour. And then I just took that straight out of my cruise performance. What other questions did you ask?
I think that covered most of them. It looks like you took Victor 21. Is there a preferred route for this flight plan? And what is the preferred route?
Okay, no, this is not a preferred route. Preferred routes, you can, again, if I pull up my my chart supplement, then I can go into preferred IFR routes. Again, if I've got the Sky Vector 4Flight, it's hot link, you can just click on that. And there are 0 preferred low altitude routes for anything departing out of Salt Lake.
And then this next question is pretty applicable for our flight plan. So let's say we did decide we wanted to take off in this, and it's VFR conditions now, but going to be becoming IFR conditions. Could I do a hybrid flight plan of VFR and then IFR?
Oh, absolutely. Like plan VFR to Malad and then from Malad, VOR towards Afton. Absolutely.
Now, what if I wasn't prudent? I didn't check the weather, and I'm flying to Afton, and all of a sudden I see all these clouds moving in. Is it possible for me to pick up an IFR clearance in the air?
Absolutely. So we can get a pop-up clearance from the ATC of the jurisdiction, or ATC US jurisdiction of the airspace you're over. So in this case, probably we call up center and say, hey, we need a pop-up IFR clearance. And if they're not too busy, then they should be able to get us that.
Perfect. All right, so how are we planning to depart Salt Lake International for this flight plan?
Okay, so Salt Lake City, let's come back and look at the charts that we have here. So one of the things I had in Salt Lake, as we get to Salt Lake City, maybe. Oh, that's why. Let's do that. Okay. So if we right click on Salt Lake, so I didn't really want to do any of the SIDs. I know, especially like if we're taking off 1.7, looks like they're departing 3.5 though. That's good. Climb gradient for the Salt Lake 4 is pretty hefty if you're going northbound. So let's go to the takeoff minimums section, which maybe I can't pull up. Well, I can if I do this.
Yeah, if you go into the airports on there, I think it'll let you get to it.
So let's just go into Salt Lake. And then we'll scroll down. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go into the takeoff minimum section. Give that a second to load, sorry. Okay, Salt Lake City, and right here, I'll make this a little bit bigger. You can see that it is a diverse vector area. So I'll just file no SIDs. That way I don't have to worry about it, and they can give me radar vectors coming out of here. And basically, all of them are just standard climb gradient.
Well, you keep saying this word SID. What does that mean?
SID, standard instrument departure. That's a ATC procedure to depart versus where versus an ODP, where an ODP is just simply, it's not an ATC procedure, has nothing to do with traffic, just simply how to take off and not hit obstacles.
Cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Salt Lake 4 real quick.
Okay.
Just so we can run through a departure procedure on here.
All right, Salt Lake 4 is right here. Okay, do you want this page or the continued one? We'll go with this one first.
Yeah, we'll go here first, and then we can go into the continued. So is this a SID or an ODP, and how do you know? Okay, so
this is a SID, and the reason why is SIDs are always graphical. They can have graphical and the textual, but there's always a graphical component. If an ODP is graphical, they're going to put in parentheses obstacle departure, because it doesn't say this is just for obstacles. It doesn't say obstacle here. I know this is an ATC procedure, and I need clearance, and it is a SID.
So up in the upper left hand corner of the document here, I guess upper right hand corner if you're looking at it the way sideways like this, it says slc4.tch. What is that?
I guess it's how to file that so that you can file the Salt Lake 4 departure.
Cool. And tch, would that ever change?
Yeah, I think I could use Fairfield Mighton Junction. So like I could probably do Salt Lake 4 dot DTA, for instance. I'd have to look at the next page to see all the different transitions possible. But yeah, I think you could change that.
And why does this SID look so much different than some of the other ones I've seen? It doesn't look like the lines are really connecting the VORs like I'm used to.
Because this is a radar vector departure. It's, there's actually no route to follow. It's simply you're going to get vectored.
Right. What do the dotted lines on this on the departure mean?
These are going to be your lost comm procedures, which just looking at the picture looks pretty confusing, but a graphical version of the lost comms in case you lost comms during the departure.
So if I lose comms when I'm doing the Salt Lake 4, I shouldn't follow Avenue F?
Well, you still should, but you're going to finish, because if what you had been assigned, right? If you've been assigned the Salt Lake 4 and its radar vectors, then yeah, finish what you've been assigned. Finish the Salt Lake 4 by following the lost comms, and then you can proceed from there.
And let's take a look at well, actually, I guess before we go there, let's assume we're taking off runway 35. What are our takeoff minimums going to be?
Okay, so if I look at runway 35, well, let's see. Yeah, let's go takeoff minimums. So we look at runway 35. So if I'm assigned heading 263, clockwise to 322, I'm looking at a standard climb, a standard takeoff minimums with a standard climb of 260 feet per nautical mile to 7,800. However, if I get assigned heading 323 clockwise to 343, then I'm looking at a standard takeoff minimums again with a minimum climb of 260 feet per nautical mile to 7,800.
So it says 260 feet per nautical mile. What does that mean? I'm used to hearing things in feet per minute.
Okay, well, feet per nautical mile, let's come back over here and we'll look at the board. Okay, feet per nautical mile. So I've got an equation where I can take my ground speed, divide that by 60, times that by that feet per nautical mile that these climb gradients get published in, and that will tell me the feet per minute that I need to hold. If you can see that. Yeah, that's the equation right there.
And so let's figure out what our required climb gradient will be. I can give you a calculator on my phone. Okay,
well, today's estimate, I was going to use 90 knot ground speed. I like to estimate that because, one, I'm climbing at an indicated 74. And sure, my trailer speed is going to be a little bit higher, maybe up into the 80s. And it doesn't look like, especially winds aloft at 6 for lighting variable. I'm not planning on much wind, but 90 gives me a safe buffer that it's going to be like, hey, I'll know I'm going to be able to make it. And it makes the math easy because 90 divided by 60, that's 1.5. So you're looking like 1.5. If I go back to the climb gradient required for 3.5 was 260. I'm going to take 260 plus another 130. I need to be able to hold 390 feet per minute. Or I could just do it all in the calculator.
Good. Now, are we going to be able to maintain that?
390 feet per minute? That's a good question. So let's come over here. I'm looking at max rate of climb at 2,550 pounds. And what we have here is starting at 4, and we're going to be, let's even use 20 degrees. We're 555 feet per minute, and we need to hold it to almost to 8,000 feet. And even at positive 20, we can hold 345, which is not quite the 390, but we're going to be closer to 0 at that point, and that's 405 feet per minute. So I think it's safe to say yes, we can meet that climb gradient.
Right. Okay, now let's go into the textual description for the departure procedure.
Okay.
And I just want you to show me where the published textual version of the departure procedure is and where the lost comm procedure is.
Okay. All right, let's make this a little bit bigger again. Okay, so here's the departure route description. So it's basic, and let's go back to 3.5. since that's what we're playing today. It says climb heading 343 or as assigned. Events and expect vectors to assigned route. I'm northbound, so I'm expecting vectors northbound. I can expect clearance to file altitude 10 minutes after departure. And it looks like I can't go eastbound until 11,000 feet due to terrain. But luckily, I'm actually filed heading 331 coming out of TCH, so that shouldn't affect us. And then from there, the rest of it is all lost comms procedures. Yeah, the whole rest of this is lost comms. I guess we'd have to skip down 3.5. Here's the lost comms procedures for 3.5.
Right. Now, could you fly this departure without a clearance?
Negative. Well, one, especially you're in Salt Lake, but even if Salt Lake didn't exist and this was, say, St. George or something, this is a SID. SID is an ATC procedure. You cannot do an AT procedure without a ATC clearance.
Right. All right, let's reference back to your IFR load chart. And let's talk a little bit about the en route portion of your flight.
Okay.
So it looks like we kind of discussed the cruising altitude already. We decided on 12,000.
And I know I was going to get radar vectors, so I plan to Ogden. I actually put a little bit more distance because I know I'm not going to go straight there. But then from Ogden, yeah, we'll go Victor 21. And let's actually make this a little bit bigger. Again. Yeah, it's good enough. So we're going to go from Ogden, go up Victor 21 to Malad. And then you can see from Malad, this is where I'm going to do the feeder route to the approach, shoot the approach, and end up at Afton.
Great. All right. Can you identify for me the MEA along Victor 21?
Okay, so here in Victor 21, between Ogden and Malad, it looks like the MEA is 10,000, although we got fences here. So, but that just changed. It's still 10,000 northbound, but if we were southbound, it'd be 7,600.
So when you say the fences, what's an example of an intersection that doesn't have them?
Yeah, so here, Pimi, it doesn't have any fences, or I like to call them fences, where like here at Blida, it has fences. So I know when I see those fences, there's an MEA change. So the MEA here is 9,400. On the other side of Blida, it's 11,400. Here, yeah, it's still 10,000 on this side of Pimi, and it's 10,000 on that side of Pimi. It doesn't change, so they don't put them in.
So let's say we were heading northbound, just hypothetically, on Victor 101. We just passed Bear, and we're about to reach Blida. What do I need to be at 11,400 before I reach that intersection?
Now, ATC is probably going to give you a clearance that's going to give you the altitude you need. However, there is not a minimum crossing altitude at Blida, so I could hit it technically at 9.4 and then begin my climb up to 11.4, assuming that I can meet en route climb gradients.
And what are the en route climb gradients?
Oh man, so because I'm going to check, I'm not just going to guess. I'm actually going to look this up, so I know exactly where it is. If I pull up my instrument procedures handbook, and I'm going to go to the en route section that actually has talks about minimum crossing altitudes and the specific question that you just asked me. That's the fun part of the check where you sit and watch me look stuff up, right?
I've actually never known. I've just memorized it. I never really know where to look it up. So.
Okay, page 239. All right, here we are. Yeah, in fact, let's go ahead and show this on the camera real quick, just so people can see. Okay, so there we got minimum crossing altitudes, and it talks about that. I am in the instrument procedures handbook, believe it or not the en route section, because this is an en route. And then listed right there on the next page. So sea level to 5 is 1,50 feet per nautical mile. Between 5,000 feet MSL to 10,000 feet MSL, you got 120 feet per nautical mile, and above 10, you're looking at 100 feet per nautical mile.
Sweet. So what do those MEAs guarantee us?
MEAs guarantee us two things: that we're not going to hit any obstacles. We get us 2,000 feet mountainous, 1,000 feet non-mountainous terrain, and that we'll have navigation signal adequate as well, unless it says MEA gap. But I shouldn't dig myself holes.
So how do we know if we're in mountainous or non-mountainous terrain?
There's a chart in the AIM, but basically, like once you hit the Rockies and you go westward, you're in mountainous terrain. And yeah, it shows the Appalachians and then I think a little bit of California. But long story short, look in the AIM, and the AIM's got a mountainous versus non-mountainous terrain map.
And then a MoCA. What is that, and how do we identify it on our IFR load chart?
MoCA will have the star. So here's a MoCA on Victor 257. So it looks like this MoCA is 10,000. And MoCA, like an MEA, is going to give me obstacle clearance, but it doesn't guarantee me nav reception for the entire route. But it does give me nav reception for the first 22 nautical miles from the nav aid. And then after that, you're probably not going to be able to receive the nav aid.
And when would I ever use the MoCA? Would ATC ever let me file below the MEA as long as I complied with the MoCA?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I want to fly along Victor 288 and I don't have oxygen. And if I have GPS and a suitable means to navigate along this Victor airway, then yeah, why not be down at 9.4 and actually file that and request that.
Cool. What is an OROCA?
So we're looking at the off-route obstacle clearance altitudes right here. And they're just kind of a rough estimate of, in this quadra section, if you were going to go off route, meaning that the MEA is not applicable now, you're going off route, that you need to be about 12,200 feet. And what that's going to do is give me that IFR obstacle separation for the entire quadra section.
Sweet. Let's go up to the Ogden VOR, and there's a little flag above it with an X in it. What does that mean? There's
our minimum crossing altitude. So we look at this. There's the Ogden VOR. We got minimum crossing altitude, and then it's going to give me the details. It looks like if I'm Victor 6 going eastbound, I need to cross at 10.7, which makes sense. If I'm going to go Victor 6, I got to be prepared to cross the Wasatch. It looks like there's also a minimum turning altitude. If I was going Victor 236 northeast, and then I was going to go to Victor 21 to go southeast like this. Obviously, if I was flying like a PC-12 going really fast, I'd overshoot that, and there could be terrain issues. So you need to be at 12,000 feet to make that tight of a turn.
Cool. And looking up a little bit further, I believe it's the Carter intersection, or no, Corinne. There's a flag with an R in it. What is that?
A minimum reception altitude. So if I'm not using GPS, looks like to receive Carter, I need to be at 13. Probably the reason why is, receiving the Malad VOR, that's fine at 10, but to know I was at Carter without GPS or DME, I'm going to need to cross-reference, I guess that'd be the Lucin VOR, and you're not picking up Lucin unless you're at 13.
Sweet. So that's not saying that I have to be on 13, right?
Negative, and especially where I've got GPS equipment, I don't care. I can identify Corinne with my GPS. I don't need to use the Lucin VOR.
Sweet. What about a changeover point? What's that? And is there any along our route of flight?
There's not one along our route of flight depicted. So in that case, we're just going to go halfway distance. So from Ogden to Malad, it looks like halfway distance is 61. So I just I called it 30 nautical miles. Technically it's 30.5. But here's a changeover point right here. If we look at the en route 11, there's a changeover point between Ogden to Fort Bridger VOR. It looks like after 25 miles after Ogden, I would switch and start using Fort Bridger.
Great. What's the total length of the Victor airway between the Ogden VOR and the Malad VOR?
So yeah, Ogden to Malad, there's the box right there, 61 nautical miles.
Very nice. Then looking over here, kind of in the bottom left here, we've got this 39 along Victor 101. What is that indicating?
Just another way to identify glida. So we know that I kind of think about it as a D. So that's a 39 nautical mile DME from Ogden VOR. So if I had DME equipment, I could know I'm at glida because I was 39 away from Ogden. If I didn't want to identify it off of the radial here off of Malad, which is 32 miles from Malad.
All right, let's go up to the Afton Airport, and I'd like you to decipher the airport information listed next to it.
Okay, so we got Afton Municipal, AFO's the identifier, altitude or elevation, 6,221 feet. It's lighted with limitations. 7,000 foot is the longest runway. It does have an AWOS, and the AWOS frequency is 119.025.
Great. And if you want to scroll down just super quickly to Delta Airport.
So like Delta Airspace or Delta Utah?
Sorry, Delta Utah.
Okay. Let's go back to world. Oh, not VFR, world low. Okay, there's Delta. So Delta Municipal DTA elevation 4,759 is slided 5,500 feet. AWAS is 127.75.
And what is MON?
It's part of the mandatory network, I think is what it calls. Let's go look again on the legend, and so we can actually like make sure I'm not telling you that wrong. But basically, the MON airport, yeah, minimum operational network airport designator. So as we're moving to next gen, there's going to be a lot of airports that are strictly just GPS stuff. Looking at when you see one that has an MON next to it, minimum operational network, it means that airport, and for the future, they're planning on maintaining a ground-based navigation facility for an approach into that airport. So I can quickly tell that Delta is going to be one of those airports where they're going to continue to have a VOR approach, and it makes it easy as I'm flight planning. That way, knowing like if I had a non-WAS GPS and I needed an alternate, it's quick like, oh, they're going to have ground-based navigation stuff, and I can look at that as an alternate.
And then I've noticed there's some green airports, some brown airports, and some blue airports. What's the difference between those colors?
So the brown are going to be not approached. So there's no instrument approach into Salina, but there is an instrument approach into Manti Ephraim. And the blue just simply means that there's also military approaches in as well, but doesn't apply. Blue or green to me is the same thing.
Great. And something I forgot to mention earlier, I believe, does it matter if we're on an easterly or westerly heading? Will that influence the desired altitude for our cruise flight?
No. So if we look at Part 91 and we go to let's go to Part 91. And then if we look under the instrument flight rules section, instrument flight rules, and we look at altitudes for IFR operations, click on that. It gives us two different ones. So oh, I'm looking at minimum altitudes. That's not the one I want, is it?
Right below it.
Oh, cruising altitudes, duh. 179. Okay, as we pull that up, cruising altitudes, it says in controlled airspace, I need to, I shall maintain the altitude or flight level assigned by ATC. So yeah, there's no real east or west. If I'm in uncontrolled airspace, now you get the whole east and west and all that nonsense.
And what airspace is considered uncontrolled airspace?
Only Gulf airspace. And believe it or not, back when I was a student pilot with an instrument, or not student pilot, but I was a student with a private pilot getting an instrument rating, there was a fair amount of Gulf airspace I could have gone and flown IFR in, but that kind of has all gone away. It doesn't exist anymore. I mean, Gulf exists, but it only goes up to 1,200 feet anywhere near us.
And the little that does exist, how would we identify anything that's above the 1,200?
The easy way to do it is look for a dark brown shaded. So in this entire chart, there's none. Let's go to world low. And how about that? Look at that. We got Gulf airspace that's going to go up above 1,200 feet AGL.
Cool. What are the dimensions of a Victor airway?
Oh my goodness, a Victor airway. So Victor airway is typically 4 nautical mile from either side of the center line. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, and as well as the vertical dimensions.
The vertical, well, I have no idea on the vertical dimensions. I would have to look that up.
Well, I think they start at 1,200.
Oh,
it's just echo.
Wherever the echo airspace begins, and then up to alpha airspace.
Yeah, because let's scroll up to the upper left corner. At least on ForeFlight, it'll show it. Maybe it won't show it on SkyVector, but I always go like up into Canada.
Oh yeah.
Because you can really see like the Victor Airways actually like cut through all the Gulf airspace up there. So so that's why, like, you know, it makes it more obvious why the Victor Airways are more important as opposed to just like going direct, I guess.
Yeah, I would have guessed the MEA up, but yeah, I guess it makes sense that you can consider the Victor Airway from wherever the controlled airspace is up.
Alrighty. How can we get en route weather updates?
En route weather updates. and contact a flight service station. Let's see if there's a nearby. I think Big Piney. I can talk to Casper Radio on 122.3, and I mean, they're talking to a weather briefer. I can get anything. ATC can give me certain stuff. They can tell me if they can see precip echoes on their radar, what other aircraft are reporting, and some minimal stuff like that. I can listen to the AWAS.
Can you listen to HIWAS anymore?
Hooray! HIWAS is gone. It doesn't exist. In fact, should we see if it's still shown on the page VOR?
I think we found that one, like the chart where it was like kind of cut off. It's still showing it, wasn't it?
Yeah, let's see. Oh man, where did I end up? Durango. Oh, I'm way too far east. Tuba City. Okay, here's page. Yeah, it's still showing. So here they've taken it away, but this chart hasn't updated, and it still has HIWAS. No, it doesn't. HIWAS is gone. Yeah, so if I look at this one here. Oh, that doesn't. I didn't want the high one. Little L9. Yeah, that one still doesn't show. Oh, that's weird because that shows it there. Oh no, it doesn't show it there. And then if we come down here to this L8, it thinks it still has it. That's because this one just hasn't been updated.
Okay, let's go over towards the Bonneville VOR. And there's kind of some unique symbology on there with regards to contacting flight service. How do we go about that?
Oh, so we got the R means that ATC, Cedar City can only receive 122.1. They can't transmit on that, but they are able to transmit over 112.3. So I just need to listen, like turn on my nav, turn up the volume so I could hear 112.3, and then I would communicate on 122.1.
Very nice.
Which has never worked for me ever, but I should probably try it more.
Do we have any options for weather monitoring in the aircraft?
Yeah, with the ADS-B in, I mean, I can pull up METARs, TAFs, I can pull up winds aloft, I can pull up SIGMETs and AirMets. It's you get the next rad radar that's put onto the screen. It's pretty amazing.
Are there any limitations with the next rad radar?
Oh yeah. So first of all, they got to package the radar. So they get whatever the radar sees. The weather guys then put it together in a package and then they're going to submit that to the satellite and then be able to send that out. And it can be anywhere up to 5 to 15 minutes old. And so like if there shows a gap on there, sure, there might have been 10 minutes ago and that might have like blown up and now you're going into red. I actually have had an instructor tell me that they went to shoot through a little gap, and then like by the time they got there, it updated and it was like moderate precip, and then they thought it was clear. And a great example of like, no, don't trust that. Now, yeah, you can use it as a tool, but just be aware that it's a little slow in updating and that information. Even if it says on the screen 4 minutes old, it could have taken up to 15 minutes to package that and get it to you for it to be 4 minutes old.
Great. Are there any pilot reports that we should be making to ATC mandatory or recommended?
So mandatory, one of the required calls is that you have to tell ATC about any unforecasted weather that needs to be done. But obviously pilot reports are helpful for other pilots and such. Yeah, even good weather. Sometimes I should put them because like if it's forecast to be all nasty and turbulent, sometimes it's nice to put out a pilot that says, hey, yeah, we had an occasional light chop, and then other pilots know, oh, maybe it's not so bad.
And then if we're going to do a malfunction report, what items should we include in that report?
Okay, if we're a malfunction report to ATC, I am actually just going to turn the page, make sure I tell you correctly. Again, I'm in the regs for instrument, and I'm going to go to the malfunction reports page, malfunction reports. 91187. So I need to tell the aircraft identification, what equipment's been affected, to degree to which the capability of the pilot to operate under IFR in the ATC system is impaired, and then what assistance is desired from ATC.
And what equipment should you be reporting? Is it anything that malfunctions, or is it specific?
Well, yeah, if I'm looking here in the reg, let's go back 91. Let's just click on 91187. 91187. Yeah, it says right here, navigation, approach, or communication equipment occurring in flight.
Sweet. Position reports. When do we need to make those?
Never. Okay, I guess we got to make them if ATC asks us to, or if we are in non-radar non-radar contact.
Right. All right. So for this en route portion of the flight, how are you planning to navigate?
Okay, so let's go back here. Honestly, I'm probably just going to pump this into my GPS and just solely use my GPS. You know, I should, let me take that back. I'll probably put in Ogden, I'll put in the LAD, but I'll probably be more backup, use bearing pointers that help give me my distance. But then I'm just going to be using pink needles to navigate there. To actually do the approach, it's an RNAV approach. So from LAD on, I'm strictly pink needles, and that's all I can really use.
Great. So how do we know that we're allowed to substitute the VORs with GPS and utilize that to navigate between them?
So again, if I go into the AIM, if I go to section, in fact, let's pull it up in the AIM real quick. So let's go back. It's in, it's not in chapter 5. It's in chapter 1, navigation, air nav. And if I go to performance-based navigation and area navigation, and GPS is a type of RNAV, I can come down here to, let me find it real quick on which. Okay, so we're going to go to 1-2-3, 1-2-2, 1-2-3, use of suitable RNAV systems. And then we're going to scroll down here to use of suitable RNAV systems. And here's what I can substitute it for. So right there, it says I can determine aircraft position relative to or distance to or from a VOR. I can navigate to or from a VOR, hold over VOR, fly an arc based off of DME. And then there's a whole bunch of like little notes associated with it.
Right. If we were planning to shoot an ILS approach, could we use GPS?
We can use GPS as guidance to the final approach fix. By the time we get to the final approach, I have to use that green needle. That doesn't mean I can't have my moving map up and I can't use it as situational awareness, but I need to have the localizer and the glide slope pulled up to shoot my ILS.
Now, what if I was using the VOR alpha approach into Ogden, for example?
Same, pretty much similar. Now, it is a little unique here. So on note 5, it says you can use a suitable RNAV system as means to navigate on the final approach segment. So I can actually use it to navigate. However, just know that the underlying nav aid, so the VOR in this case, must be operational and the nav aid monitored for the final approach segment. And monitored means that like I actually have that as part of my navigation equipment pulled up that I can see it. So in this case, I can use pink needles as long as I've got that bearing pointer underneath. So I am using the VOR and I'm using pink needles. But notice that does not say ILS in here. That's just for VOR, TACAN, or NDB. In ILS, I've got to have that green needle.
Great. All right, while we're flying en route, how do we know if our GPS is reliable and if we can trust it?
Well, if it is an IFR certified GPS, we know it has RAIM. And RAIM is Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring, which is guaranteeing the integrity of the system. Since my GPS has that, I mean, it has to be an IFR GPS. It's going to automatically and independently, autonomously monitor the integrity. So I already know that that's taking place. It will give me an annunciation and flag if it's no longer able to do that.
So I thought the RAIM had to be done manually at the beginning of a flight.
So what you're thinking of is the RAIM prediction. So, and it does say in before you do a GPS approach that you should do a RAIM prediction to make sure that you're actually going to be successful on that approach. So before I go fly, I can do a RAIM prediction to make sure that I'm not going to lose RAIM during my flight. It's just a prediction. It isn't RAIM. It's just thinking. It just is saying, hey, based off of how many satellites we have currently right now and which ones are operational, you should have enough that you should have RAIM at this time, at this point. Where, you know, if I did that RAIM prediction and said, nope, RAIM's not going to be available over Afton at my time of arrival, and that saved me a lot of headache of going up there and finding that out.
And what would happen if we lost RAIM? How would you be notified?
So it will be an annunciation. I think in the G1000, it's an INTEG. Usually if I was using pink needles, they would turn yellow. If there was some GPS position still available, but it just can't guarantee the position anymore, or the needle would just completely go away. Yeah.
And how many satellites do we need in order to compute RAIN?
So we would need 5. You got to have an extra satellite over what you need for a 3-dimensional picture to actually cross-check the satellites to guarantee position.
Great. And what are the different GPS sensitivities?
For my CDI needle? Cool. I've actually got this document pulled up in hopes that you would be asking me that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that document, which is a lot easier to look at than explain. Okay, so here's this is the G1000 pilot guide. My instructor was really nice and gave this to me. Okay, I'm pretending, but actually I made this document. Okay, so here's the different automatic CDI scalings when you're using the G1000. So when you're within 30 nautical miles from your departure airport, it's in the departure mode is 0.3, 1 mile for terminal. And I think this one, I should say, this is for WASP equipped aircraft. 2 miles en route, oceanic or en route. Terminal, again, if I'm 30 miles from the destination airport, it goes to 1. Approach, it goes to 1, and then it shrinks down into 0.3, and then even greater sensitivity, and then missed approach goes back to 0.3. Yeah, so if it was an LNAV, VNAV, that's kind of how it would scale. And if you're doing an LPV approach, it scales more like an ILS like that.
Cool. And kind of going back to our RAIN failures, what if we're shooting an RNAV approach and we lose RAIN after the final approach fix?
Okay, so if you lose RAIN after the final approach fix, then I will begin climbing. I'm going to, now if I lose RAIN, it should still guide me to my final approach or my missed approach point, but I'm not going to continue descent. I'm going to climb up for my missed approach and continue to the missed approach point and then execute the missed approach. Which theoretically speaking, according to this document, is pretty much impossible because it's not going to go into the approach mode. See out here, this one went from terminal to like LNAV or LPV. It won't do that unless it does a RAIN prediction right before it does that. And so yes, we should continue to have RAIN the entire way. But if it did happen, I'm climbing up, continuing in this approach.
Sweet. And how do we know if our GPS is WASP equipped?
So the easiest way inside the aircraft is when you go to the page, the auxiliary page where you can check RAIN, there's a SBAS soft key button at the bottom, which stands for Space Base Augmentation System. I can click that and it will show me if WAS is currently up with a little check mark next to WAS or if it doesn't.
And what are the benefits of having WAS?
So the main thing with WAS is it's going to improve your location that the GPS is giving you and change it from about 30 meters to about 3 meters. So you're way more accurate, which gives us the ability to use that accuracy for the GPS to give me a glide slope, say on an LPV, and to lower my approach minimums. There's also advantages like we had talked about with the alternate bins or alternate airports where I can actually go to a GPS only airport and use a GPS only alternate if I have WAS. And I could also fly WAS solely with GPS with the VORs removed. Now, like we talked about in the Cessna's POH prohibits that. But generally speaking, with WAS, that is a benefit.
Great. Now, talking about GPS more vaguely, what does GPS stand for, and what are the different elements that make up the GPS system?
Okay, global. I don't know what GPS stands for. Global Position System, Global Navigation Satellite System, GNSS. And then what was the second question?
What are the different components that make up the GPS system?
All right, well, so first of all, we've got the space component. In fact, let's go back to take away that screen. We'll go back to the camera. So we've got the space-based component. That's all the satellites above the Earth. They are going to be transmitting their radio waves. You're going to have the user, which has a GPS unit and an antenna that receives the signal in the unit, then interprets it. But there's also a ground-based control unit to it. I know there's one in Colorado Springs that just kind of makes sure that the satellites are doing what they're supposed to be doing, that they're not leaving their orbit and or that their clocks aren't off.
Great. And kind of going back to the approaches that we were talking about earlier, what are some of the different GPS approaches that we have available to us, and how do we differentiate those from each other?
Okay, so with GPS approaches, in fact, let's go and pull one up again. depending on if you have WAS or not, can really change which ones you can do. So let's start with LNAV. In fact, I might be able to show you on this document here. Yeah, here's the different kinds right here. So LNAV, this is the GPS approach using LNAV minimum. This is just simple GPS. So like my 430 non-WAS, I can do LNAV. LNAV plus VNAV, this is where you're actually using the GPS for vertical guidance, and you can't do that without WAS. So if you don't have WAS, you're not doing the vertical nav. Lateral navigation plus vertical navigation, again, you're going to need WAS to do that. Also, I know a lot of airliner FMS systems have LNAV, VNAV, RNAV systems in it. They can shoot that. And then you got LPV, localizer performance with vertical guidance. And again, that is going to be WAS only. So really, you can say, hey, if you've got LNAV, if you're non-WAS, you're using LNAV. If you have WAS, you can then use one of the other higher, or I should say lower minimas if available.
And going back to the approach that we chose into Afton, do we have the option to do LPV, assuming that we're WAS equipped?
Let's go take a look at Afton and see what they have available there. Okay, so we'll look at Afton. So let's pull up the approach I was planning on using. Scroll in. Afton, oops, clicked on it, sorry. Runway 34. Yeah, so they simply have LNAV and circling minimums, so it really doesn't matter if I have WAS or not, same minimums.
And assuming we were shooting a GPS approach that allowed for LPV minimums, how would we know what our GPS, what minimums it's been programmed to use when we load the approach? How do we know if it's using LNAV minimums or capable of doing the LPV minimums?
So it'll tell you right next to the CDI needle. It will just say LPV or LNAV, which is super helpful. Yeah, and I've even shot an LPV approach when it popped up LNAV, and I said, well, okay, I'm not shooting the LPV anymore. I'm going to go LNAV, even though I was in a WAS aircraft that should have been able to, for whatever reason, my GPS wasn't giving me that, whether there was a slight loss of integrity that the WAS wasn't working, or I'm not exactly sure what happened. But so I shot the LNAV minimums in that case.
Great. All right, let's move on to some holding procedures.
Okay.
So I'll give you a holding clearance. You can draw it up for me. Do we have one of the
HSI tools?
Yeah.
I just got a regular viewer.
Perfect, that'll work. And we can determine the type of entry.
Okay. Let's grab one of my better markers.
Cool. And I got your indication all set up on there, so I'll give you your clearance when you're ready.
All right. I'm ready to copy holding instructions.
All right. 225 Whiskey Charlie. Hold northeast of the Ogden VOR on the 060 radial. Left-hand turns. Expect further clearance in 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to hold northeast of Ogden VOR on the 060 degree radial left turns and expecting further clearance in 5 minutes.
Cool. And then I have your indications set up for you there.
Okay, so we've got indications. Oh, you made this easy for me. Okay, I've got a 150 with a 2 flag. That means the 150 radial from my current position would take me to the station. I'm currently heading 030. So roughly, let's draw this out. So I'm asked, I had the 150 in like this, and it's going to take me to 2. So I'm not down there. It's centered up. I'm somewhere like right there. Looks like my heading is 030. Don't know where I'm going, but yeah, basically I'm just going to fly about heading 150 and go directly to the VOR.
Very nice. And what type of entry?
Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to direct entry. Yeah, yeah, that would be the most appropriate.
And can you walk me through the 5 T's that you would do upon reaching the fix?
Okay, so once I hit this fix, I'm going to turn outbound. Outbound is going to be 230. Just use the +2 -2 rule. And then so that's turn. I'm going to time for 1 minute outbound. I'm going to twist, and I'm going to twist the inbound course of 230 into my CDI. I'm going to, 3 minutes prior to here, I'm going to slow down to about 2,200 RPM, slow me down to 90 knots. And then once I'm established in the hold, let ATC know. So 50 is talk.
Sweet. And how long should each leg be?
So at the altitudes that we fly, we're looking about 1 minute inbound leg. If that's what my goal is, I'll adjust the outbound to do whatever it needs to do to make the inbound 1. And then both turns should be 1 minute turns, standard rate turns.
What's the difference between a DME hold and a timed hold?
So a time hold is what I've drawn here, where I'm expecting a 1 minute inbound. Sometimes they have a DME hold where like they'll put like 7 nautical mile DME, and in that case, basically, I'm just going to go outbound until I get a 7 nautical mile DME from the fix. No, no inbound.
Cool. All right. So speaking of VOR, since we're holding over the Octa VOR, how does a VOR work?
How does a VOR work? So VOR is going to send out a frequency in all directions, and really you're going to get 2 separate signals from it. You're going to get a what's called the reference signal, and then a sweep signal, and the timing between the 2, your antenna is going to be able to tell you where you are. They are very high frequency, so they come in clear, very accurate within degree, but they are limited to line of sight. So that means if I go behind a mountain or something like that, I'm going to lose the VOR.
And how do we know when VOR signal is lost? Is there an indication?
Yeah, we'll just get a nav flag on our in this case on our HSI. The needle will pull away. It won't indicate anything.
And what is reverse sensing, and can we get reverse sensing with an HSI?
Technically, you could with an HSI. Our HSI, no, because like the localizer won't let you, even if you tried to. But reverse sensing is basically like here, if I'm tracking inbound on the 150 and I decided to tune in the 330 degree radial, and I'm going backwards on it. But the nice thing on an HSI, if I did that, here's my HSI, right? I'd have a 330 at the bottom here. And so let's say I deviated off here where it's saying, hey, you're off to the right, of course. It would put it off to the right. And now notice based off of there, oh wait, do that backwards. Based off of 330, it's off to the left, so it would pull like that. But notice here I would need to turn right, so that actually feels like normal sensing.
Cool. NDBs. How does an NDB work compared to a VOR?
So an NDB is basically just a simple AM station. It pumps out a low frequency in all directions, and it is not limited to line of sight, which is, well, could be good or bad if you're trying to follow it VFR through IMC conditions and hit a mountain. But they're not very accurate either. They're much more susceptible to disturbances such as lightning, and even the difference between day and night can distort the signal.
Is an NDB directional like a VOR?
Negative. So it picks up, all we know is from the aircraft which direction it is in terms of left or right or in front of us or behind us. It doesn't tell us what radial we're on, so to speak. We have to figure that out on our own.
What's a localizer? So
the localizer is the navigational ground-based aid that sits on the other side of the runway and gives you guidance, very, very accurate guidance to the runway.
Sweet. And what equipment do we need in order to track a localizer? Or navigate via a localizer? You
got to have the VOR receiver. Any VOR receiver can track a localizer. Now you got to have. Not all VOR receivers can also do the glide slope, but they can do, any VOR receiver can track a localizer.
And do we have to ID a localizer like we would ID a VOR?
Absolutely. Still ID it, make sure you got the right frequency, that it's still up and working.
Cool. All right, moving on to emergencies. Let's say you received the following clearance. You're cleared to Afton, Wyoming.
Okay, should I write this clearance down?
Do it.
Okay, this is from Salt Lake.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm cleared AF. Okay.
Via Victor 21. Well, vectors, Victor 21, climb and maintain 1,200. 12,000, sorry.
12,000. Okay.
Okay. And you're on, let's say you're about 10 miles south of the Malad VOR, and you get X's through your comms in the G1000.
Shoot.
Gonna do?
Cry. Okay, let's go back and look at. Well, let's start with just the simple. The route I'm going to fly is Avenue F. I'm going to assign based off of. I'm going to go based off what was assigned, vectored, expected, or filed in that priority order. In this case, I've been assigned Victor 21 to AFO. So, and it happened at Malad.
10 miles south of it.
Oh, so just before Malad. Okay, so I'm going to continue to Malad. I'm going to fly the highest out of the MEA, expected or assigned. In this case, the MEA was only 10. So the MEA was 10. I didn't have anything expected. Assigned was 12. So I'm going to stay up at 12. Okay. And I'm going to basically, I mean, the MEA or from Malad, at that point, I hadn't been assigned Victor 21, but really I filed to go over to IVU in the approach. So at that point, I would deviate off of Victor 21 and go on to my approach. Let's go ahead and switch screens so we can look at that one. So here, yep, so I'm going to expect from Malad. That was probably what I had filed to IVU. So then that would be my route, and still the highest would be 12. So I'm going to stick at 12 to IVU.
Cool. And then when we're reading the reg for the lost comms, does what we're required to do in a lost comm scenario change depending on whether or not our clearance limit is an initial approach fix?
Absolutely. So in this case, our clearance limit was the airport. So luckily I can just throw all that garbage out the window and I can just go shoot the approach. Let's say my clearance limit was Malad. Because it's not an initial approach fix, I'm going to leave that one at my EFC. If EFC has not been received, I will leave it immediately. And then I will proceed to an initial approach fix. If my clearance limit is an initial approach fix, I'm going to leave it again at my EFC. If none has been received, then I'm going to leave the initial approach fix at the time of arrival as I filed on my flight plan.
And what does that mean? Does that mean time of arrival at the initial approach fix, or is that at the airport?
To whatever I filed. So if I filed, hey, from Salt Lake to AFO is going to take me an hour and 33 minutes, an hour and 33 minutes into the flight, that's when I'm going to begin my descent.
Great. All right, arrivals. What is the purpose of an arrival?
Minimize ATC communications and make it easier for specifically, like especially airlines and jets, to plan on certain arrivals. And it gives a simple communication when you say, hey, fly the Brigham City 3 arrival. You just give a ton of information versus having to say, hey, fly to this point and then to this point and then so forth.
Are we going to be flying an arrival for this flight?
No, because Afton doesn't have any arrivals. And I mean, I guess Jackson probably does, but I would imagine that Afton's far enough away from Jackson, though, that doesn't get covered in that. I guess on the way back into Salt Lake, that could definitely be an option.
And if we were coming back in Salt Lake and got cleared for an arrival, what's the difference between being cleared for the arrival and being cleared to descend via the arrival?
Well, on an arrival, you're going to have two different things that are going to be given you. You're going to have vertical navigation, so like altitudes to fly and that kind of stuff. But then you're also going to have lateral navigation. So if they clear you for the Brigham City 4 arrival, which is this one here, then simply all they are doing is clearing me for this lateral route. But they're not clearing me for any of the required altitudes. If they told me to descend via, then say here at Carter, I would need to meet that. I need to be at or above 14,000. Or if I'm coming to Diane, I would need to be at or above 11,000. Where if I just got cleared for the Brigham City 3, then simply I follow whatever altitude ATC assigns, and I just laterally follow it.
So being cleared for an arrival is not the same as being cleared for an approach.
Correct. An arrival does not clear me for an approach.
Cool. All right, let's open up back to the approach into Afton.
Whoa. Okay. RNAV, runway 34.
Yes. Okay, so how do we know what type of approach this is? Where does it show that?
RNAV GPS, runway 34.
Very nice. And let's go over some of the symbology that we can find up in the notes section.
Oh, okay.
So on the left side of that box, we've got a T, an A, and a snowflake.
Okay, non-standard takeoff minimums for this airport, non-standard alternate minimums for this airport, and I can't even use this approach to as filing an alternate. And then the snowflake means there's cold weather restrictions. So if it got below 22 degrees Celsius, I would need to do some altimetry to add altitudes to all the different minimum altitudes on the approach in order to make that safe for me to fly.
And it says when you say non-standard alternate minimums, what are the standards?
So if it's a precision approach, standard alternate minimums have to be 600 foot ceilings, 2 statute mile visibility, and for non-precision, 800 foot ceiling, 2 statute mile visibility.
And what about for takeoff minimums? What would be defined as standard?
Oh man, let's look that up. Because I don't ever use this because Part 91, we don't really have any. So let's go back to takeoff minimums. That's enhanced visibility. Takeoff and landing under IFR. So instant approach, DA, keep going, mission approach. Okay, civil airport takeoff minimums only for Part 121, 125, 129, 135. Here it is. Aircraft other than helicopters having 2 engines or less, which would be me in a Skyhawk if I was 135 in a Skyhawk, 1 statute visibility. So in statute mile visibility is my takeoff minimums. If I had a 3-engine airplane, then it shrink down to half.
Right. And any standard climb gradients that would be associated with standard takeoff?
Well, standard, I mean, for departure procedure, standard is 200 feet per nautical mile, unless otherwise denoted.
Cool. All right, going back to the approach on there.
Okay.
Let's go to plan view, and let's talk about some of the initial approach fixes that can be found on the chart.
Okay, so I see IAF right there. So IVAU, hopefully I'm saying that right. That's initial approach fix. Call is an initial approach fix. Sissel is an initial approach fix as well. Big Piney is just a feeder route. Grips is a feeder route. Malad's a feeder. Then you got the final approach fix at all red. So yeah, those are your 3 initial approach fixes.
And how do the initial approach fixes differ from the feeder routes?
So one, you can tell this is a big thick line here, and where these are thin lines. So these thin lines are not part of the approach. It's just kind of an additional bonus of like, hey, if you were over Malad, this will get you to IVAU, but that's not part of the approach. And it says a thin line there.
And what is that dotted line that looks like a holding procedure there at IVAU?
No, that's the missed approach procedure. So here it looks like it's a climbing left turn. We'd come to IVAU and do a hold with a 7 nautical mile leg.
And it looks like some of these waypoints are a little bit different than each other. Why is this one a circle around it as opposed to these ones without the circle?
So without the circle, these are fly-by waypoints. I don't actually have to fly over that. So like when I'm coming to call here, I can actually anticipate that, leave my turn a little early so I come right on the course. I don't have to hit it and then turn. But the missed approach point is always going to have a circle. Those are fly-over waypoints. You actually have to fly over that. I can't lead that. If I'm going missed, I can't turn early and come out. I've actually got to fly over runway 34, and then I can turn out.
And what's the purpose of this holding procedure over the Cal intersection?
So this is a procedure turn. It looks like I do not need to do it for my VAU because it says no procedure turn. But say I was coming from the north up here and I came down like this and they told me clear direct call or KL intersection, then I would do this procedure turn to get reestablished back on the final approach course to shoot the approach.
And up in the left-hand corner of the plan view, we have the MSA circle. What's that?
So MSA circle is for emergency procedures where this is going to give you 1,000-foot terrain clearance. So, and it looks like a round runway 34 within a 25 nautical mile radius. So if I'm doing this approach and like I have a blackout or something crazy happens and I don't know where I'm at anymore, hey, if I get up to 12.6, at least I'm not going to hit terrain. Yeah, this is a T approach, and usually they'll have the terminal arrival sectors, but this one doesn't have that. Yeah.
And how much terrain clearance does that provide?
The MSA circle only provides 1,000-foot terrain clearance.
Even in mountainous terrain?
Even in mountainous terrain, which is why this is not a planned altitude. I don't use this unless it's an emergency.
Cool. Let's go down to the minima section. So is this a precision or a non-precision approach?
Well, it's easy because it's an RNAV. It's a non-precision, so there's no physical glide slope for me to follow. So, and then I look at the minimums, and it's an LNAV only. So this is strictly these are not precision approaches. Not only that, they're non-precision without vertical guidance as well.
And where is the final approach fix and the missed approach point?
Okay, so you can see the Maltese cross, all red, is the final approach fix, and the missed approach point is going to be this last depicted waypoint here, RNAV 34. Right there, there is final approach. That's the missed approach point.
And then what is this black V?
The black V is for VDP, this visual descent point. If we look up visual descent point in the AIM, basically saying if I get down to minimums by 7620 before my VDP, I don't want to keep descending because I'm going to be like totally like scraping it in, right? Even if I have the runway in sight. So I'd want to hold my altitude until the VDP. But vice versa, it also is a good indicator that I probably want to get to 7620 at that point so I can make a normal descent plan. If I wait till I'm at runway 34 and I happen to pop out of the clouds, you know, slowly I'm coming down, finally I hit 7620 right at runway 34. I'm 1,400 feet basically above the ground. I'm not going to be able to make a normal descent plan. So it kind of shows me, hey, get down to make your normal descent, but don't descend before that, below your MDA, even if runway's in sight.
And is there a way for us to calculate VDP?
Sure. If they did depict one, you could take like your height above touchdown, divide that by 3. There's a few different equations so that I could self-calculate one if I wanted to.
And how do we determine which minimums we're going to be using for this approach?
So I guess in this case, whether we're circling or whether we're straight in. So if we're straight in, we'll use the LNAV minimums. And then I guess we got to figure out which category, and categories dependent on the speed you fly the approach. So below 90 is going to be 7620. You know, if I'm circling though, I'd shoot the approaches below 90 knots. If my ground speed's above that, I'm probably going to bump it up as I go. It looks like it's still 7620, so I'm not too concerned about that. But just to make sure that I'm safe, especially like, you know, if I'm doing the approach doing 130 because of my ground speed, I probably want to have higher circling radius as that wind pushes me in my circle.
And when we talk about circling minimums, I've seen a black C in some approach charts down there. What is that?
The black C means that they would have the new circling minimum criteria. This one, I guess, hasn't been updated yet, which is kind of surprising. So it's the old circling minimum criteria. So the black C, you're going to have basically larger turning radius, especially at higher density altitudes, or higher altitude airports, I should say, where the old criteria, it was just strictly here, you know, category A is this, category B is this, regardless of your altitude.
And where can I look that information up?
Let's show you that real quick in the TERPs. So TERPs going to pull that up in this front section here, and if I go, it's like 2 pages in. There is your. Make sure you can actually see that focused in. But anyway, there's your categories for the circling minimums. So in this one, in this case, category A only gives me 1.3 nautical miles from either approach end. Category B gives me 1.5 and so on.
So you said from approach end, how do we measure the circling requirements, and is that where our GPS measures from?
I guess I'm not understanding the GPS measurement, but from they're basically going to take the end of this runway and just paint a 1.3 nautical mile radius around it, and same with 1.6, paint a 1.3, and then kind of connect them. That's your circling safe area. So what was the question about that?
Yeah. And the second part is just, does your GPS measure from the approach ends of the runway?
In this case, it happens to. Oh yeah, nearest page from the airport is probably going to be from somewhere in the middle. The jet plates actually tell you the specific location. It tells you like where, but on these plates they don't. You can assume it's somewhere in the middle. But it would give me for RNAV 34 since that's my missed approach point.
Cool. All right.
Or runway 34.
Under what conditions are we allowed to descend from our MDA or DA all the way into landing? 3
things are required. I gotta have a normal descent to land. I gotta have the required visibility as prescribed in the approach minimums. And I need to have the runway environment in sight.
Cool. And if you lose sight of the runway while you're circling to land, what should you do?
Let's start climbing. And I'm going to make my initial turn towards the airport environment. And then, so like in this case, it's a climbing left turn, but I'm going to initially turn right if I was circling off to the side of the airport. Go back to, if I circle to the left, sorry, I turn right back towards the airport, and then I would do the circling left turn.
Cool. And if you got full scale deflection while you were shooting this approach, what would you do?
You bet I'm going miss. So add power, or start climbing, but still I would try to track to the missed approach point as best I could while climbing, and then continue on this approach from there.
Cool. All right, moving on to instruments. Okay, you got 2 screens in the Cessnas. What can you tell me about?
So we got a PFD and an MFD. PFD is primary flight display. MFD is multifunction display. Primary flight display simply does that, displays my primary flight instruments. MFD, it can display a lot of crap. In fact, I can turn it into a PFD if I wanted to, as well as moving map, auxiliary page, flight plan, all of that fun stuff.
What do the air data computer and the AHRS unit in the G1000 do?
So the air data computer is going to take pitot, static, and outside air temperature input into the computer using its magic computer chips and all that fancy stuff. It's going to calculate that stuff, and it's going to output indicated airspeed, true airspeed, altitude, vertical speed, outside air temperature, and then using other things like the GPS that uses that air data computer information to give us stuff like the wind arrow on the PFD and that kind of fun stuff.
Sweet. And what would happen if our static source iced over?
So if the static source iced over, I would use my alternate static source. That's gonna make my altimeter freeze. VSI would read 0. My airspeed indicator would read erroneous. If I was on a different altitude from where, if it was on the altitude I froze at, it'd actually be fine. But then I'd use my alternate static source, the red knob, pull that, and usually you're gonna get a little jump, meaning that like it's gonna read a little bit higher altitude than it should. Momentarily there'll be a climb on the VSI, and then your airspeed will read higher momentarily, or will read just a touch higher.
Okay, and what instruments will the AHRS provide for us, and how does the AHRS system work?
Oh, the AHRS is a beautiful piece of machinery. It is going to give us attitude. It's going to give us heading, turn and slip. Yeah, those instruments. And basically, it's a computer, and it uses accelerometers, rate sensors, tilt sensors. Basically, it's kind of very similar stuff to what my iPhone has, but much more sensitive and much more of those sensors to make it really accurate to give me the attitude indicator and that sort of fun stuff.
So you're saying it doesn't use a gyro?
There's no physical gyro in the AHRS. It's all electronics, basically. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Could the magnetometer fail independently of your AR system?
Absolutely, because the magnetometer is a separate piece of equipment. It's another line removable unit that everything will still function without it. It just wouldn't be able to give us our heading. Yeah, so it would function.
And what if your integrated avionics unit failed? What would you lose?
My integrated avionics unit failed. It depends on which one, but really I just use one GPS, one comm, one nav, and then everything else should function with the other one.
Sweet. How does the standby airspeed and altimeter work?
So we're going to use the same pitot static source that the air data computer did. Pipe it to the airspeed indicator, and then the same static source the air data computer uses pipes to the altimeter. Do you want more depth than that?
Yeah. So if we were to crack open the case of those instruments,
okay.
Just see in there.
So the airspeed is going to have a little wafer that can expand and contract, and inside that wafer, pitot pressure will be directly ported. And then you're going to have a sealed case with static pressure going into the sealed casing. And basically what it's doing is it's measuring dynamic pressure versus what pressure was just there in the air anyway, and interpolating that dynamic pressure into how fast you're moving. So the faster you go, the more pitot pressure expands that wafer, showing on the airspeed, showing basically what the airspeed it feels like the airplane is moving. The altimeter also has an aneroidic wafer that can expand and contract. Inside that one, though, is sealed, just set sea level pressure. And then your casing is going to pipe in the static pressure, and it's just measuring what pressure you're at now compared to sea level and telling you how high above that you are.
What type of airspeed are we reading on the airspeed indicator?
Indicated. I like to call it a pressure speed or the feel speed. It's what the airplane feels like it's at. It's not how fast you're actually moving, but as far as performing like VY and VS and your speed at which to shoot your approach, yeah, it's what it feels like.
And what are some other types of airspeeds that we should be familiar with?
So calibrated airspeed is going to correct indicated airspeed because the pitot tube is not always perfectly aligned with the wind. Sometimes you're a little bit more pitched up or a little more down. So calibrated airspeed will account for those errors and be more accurate of what the airplane feels like. And then from there, we can go to true airspeed. True airspeed takes calibrated airspeed and corrects it for non-standard pressure and temperature. Because the thinner the air you're going through, you're actually moving a lot faster through it than what it feels like. So your true airspeed's faster. So you take that non-standard temperature and pressure, and you can get a true airspeed for how fast you're actually moving through that air mass. Throw wind correction into it. Now we can see how fast we're moving across the ground.
Sweet. And do temperature and altitude affect the accuracy of our airspeed?
No, I mean indicated. Still going to be indicated, and then obviously the higher up we go, true airspeed is the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Cool. What about with the altimeter? Are there any errors with temperature, pressure?
Absolutely. So we already talked about the snowflake on the chart. So temperature is one of the big ones. The colder it gets, the altimeter is going to tell you you're higher than you actually are, and you're going to be lower than where you really are. The altimeter is meant to, for every 1,000 feet that you're going to lose 1 inch of pressure. The problem is on a cold day, the whole atmosphere contracts a little bit. So you'll go up, say, 980 feet and lose an inch of pressure, and it's going to think you're actually 1,000 feet. So temperature will, and of course pressure. If I don't update my altimeter setting as I go along, I mean, I've seen the difference between the altimeter setting in Evanston and Salt Lake be 500 feet. Where, man, you can imagine if you don't update that and you come shoot an approach down to 300-foot MDA, you're 200 feet below the ground at that point. That's not going to work.
And then what are the standby gyro instruments that we have available?
Just our attitude indicator. And it's got a actual mechanical gyro that's a spinning disc. And it is an engine-driven vacuum pump that provides air pressure to spin the gyro.
And is this gyro influenced by precession?
In a way, yes, absolutely. So we actually use precession to our advantage. We have pendulous vanes that hang down to try to keep the gyro perpendicular with gravity. I can go much more in detail on how those work, but it does have that. But it doesn't really suffer from precession. It does momentarily, but then it quickly self-corrects. Like, I guess if I'm maneuvering pretty abruptly, you do that 180-degree turn where it'll show it funny, but I can't even tell you the details on those errors.
So the pendulous vanes are there so that we don't have to continually adjust the gyro in the attitude indicator like we do if we were using a heading indicator.
That's right. It'll self-erect. It pulls itself up on startup. I don't need to try to have it level out. And then the beauty of it is, if I fly from LA to New York, the horizon in LA versus the horizon in New York are different angles because the Earth is round, and it will just self-adjust for the curvature of the Earth as you go.
Okay, that's about halfway.
Okay, did I pass?
You passed. 40 colors.
Okay. Well, man, that was a long video. For those of you who are still watching this, obviously that's a ton of information. You're not going to get all of that on one check. And there's a lot of questions that I asked in my stage check that Tyler didn't ask me, but it's all the same material. So hopefully that was beneficial for you guys to watch this and see what that's like. Okay. Take care.
Wow, that was almost 2 hours. Jeez.